Welcome to Our Village Circle, a podcast centered around authentic sharing, honest storytelling, and elevating the voices of parents and professionals alike to demystify the realities of new parenthood. We understand on a visceral level that with the joy of your new human also comes every other emotion under the sun. We want you to feel seen, heard, known, and held in this life-altering stage. We wholeheartedly believe that everyone's story has something powerful to offer others as they navigate their own journey. Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of Our Village Circle. I'm your host, Jaylee Turner, and on today's episode, we're going to meet Allison Coleman. Allison and I met through a mutual friend when she learned that we were both in about the same stage of our postpartum journeys. We have sons that are almost the same age, and we both, after going through our postpartum journeys, felt a spark to do something to begin to change the conversation around postpartum. I became really, really inspired by what Allison has been doing, and so we connected and we hit it off. She's a toddler mom from Baltimore, Maryland, and she is also the owner of Joey For Roo, a baby apparel brand dedicated to supporting and encouraging newly postpartum parents. The creation of Joey For Roo stemmed from Allison's own experience with postpartum depression and OCD. And in this first of 2 episodes, she shares her story, launching us into a discussion about perinatal mental health and the state of maternal healthcare in the United States of America. This was a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Hi, Allison. Welcome to Our Village Circle.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and your family.
My name is Allison Coleman. I'm originally from Virginia, but I've also lived in California, and now I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm a mom. I'm a wife, and I also am a runner. I work for a local nonprofit in PR and social media. I love to travel, and yeah, especially after my son is born, I've just become really passionate about maternal mental health.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about that. How did that come to be for you?
I want to say I struggled with, but I struggle with postpartum depression, anxiety, and OCD. That's been something that I think realistically I can acknowledge that probably came on while I was pregnant, but really, really became apparent to me after my son was born in February 2019. I have a history of depression and anxiety. So I thought, oh, I'll know how to handle postpartum depression if that happens to me. I think I honestly even expected that it would. I think I knew that was going to happen to me. And yet I still was completely unprepared and really just, yeah, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt so alone and was just really did not have a foundation of what maternal mental health looked like and how to get help and when I needed help. And yeah, just really all of it was just a huge mystery to me and left me feeling incredibly alone.
Yeah. I feel like on paper, the description of postpartum depression and what that looks like versus the lived experience of
Absolutely.
Going through a PMAD while you also have a new being to care for, while your body is changing, while your hormones are haywire, while your relationship with your partner is changing, while everyone else's relationship to you is changing. It's just a lot all muddled in this soup of confusion, and it can, especially because of everything else going on, I feel like perinatal mood and anxiety disorders are one of those things that can so easily get missed, especially because when you leave the hospital with a new baby, what do they tell you? They say, contact us if you want to hurt yourself or your baby. And that's about it.
Yep.
Which in other words, it's we really only care if you're going to hurt someone.
Yeah. And I think I just really want to touch on just that language, because I think you're so right, is call us if you want to hurt yourself or your baby. And that want in there is so important because I had intrusive thoughts and I did not in any way, shape, or form want to hurt myself or my baby, but I had intrusive thoughts about hurting myself and my baby. And it absolutely terrified me. And I didn't want to have those thoughts. And it was absolute torture because these thoughts would just come into my brain and I had no idea where they were coming from. They would come in like that. And it was terrifying. And I felt like I had two brains. There was one brain that had these really terrible thoughts, these really scary thoughts. And then the other side of this other brain that would do absolutely anything to protect my baby and myself and my family. And I just felt, where does that fit in? And so I just really want to touch on the fact that you said that if you want to, that want is so important. And so it makes you feel like I don't want to. And so where are these thoughts coming from? And it just leaves people in this really difficult situation. And then on top of that, knowing, okay, what happens if I do call them and say that I am honest about these thoughts? We know that parents get their kids taken away for being honest about things like that. I have spoken with moms who have had that happen to them when really what they're experiencing is intrusive thoughts and postpartum depression, and their kids are taken away from them. And we know that's even worse for people who aren't white women. So I think that it's just really something that needs to be addressed. And when doctors and families don't know about this, it just creates this really difficult situation that really, has no good outcomes when we're not talking about it.
Yeah, I remember that fear myself when I was struggling. I think it took a long time for me to recognize that I was struggling with a postpartum mood disorder because of that. Like you said, you touched on it perfectly, the want, because I was having, in hindsight, intrusive thoughts. I remember in the middle of the night when my baby would not stop crying, I had visions come into my mind of myself slamming him over the coffee table.
Mm-hmm.
And then I knew I wasn't going to do it, but it was a scary thought. And I remember telling my husband about it too. And he was like, I know, like, I'm so sleep deprived. Like, I've had similar visions of just like shaking him and whatever. So to me, I was like, okay, yeah, that's pretty normal. But it was disturbing to me. And I remember I never really shared that with anyone at the time because I was afraid that if I told my pediatrician that we would have a CPS case on us. I was afraid that if I told any friends about it or any family that they would be like, oh my God, why would you ever want to hurt your baby? I would never want to do that. And then there's that shame aspect involved. And I didn't want to be viewed as a bad mom. And I didn't want to be viewed like I wasn't coping with it. I think that there's such a shame aspect around motherhood. What do they tell you when you have a baby? Enjoy every second. And
my doctor literally said those words to me when I told her that I was struggling. She literally said to me, they are only small for so long. Just enjoy every moment. And I just felt, okay, like I'm clearly not going to be getting the help that I need here. And it just made me feel so much worse.
Every moment.
Of course, exactly. If it was like, do you think that I'm choosing to sit here sobbing instead of watching him sleep like a perfect angel and have those thoughts instead of, oh my God, he's going to wake up soon and start crying. And what am I going to do? And when does my husband get home? And when can he take over? And I'm not, of course, I would love to be able to be in that bliss, but I just wasn't feeling it. And that the idea of enjoying every moment was just absolutely impossible. Like my brain at that time was incapable of enjoying any moment, let alone every moment.
I remember sitting on the couch with my baby, just trying so hard to enjoy it. Like I would sit there for ages and ages and just stare at him. And I'm like, if I stare at you enough, maybe I'll feel this joy that everyone
You're like, this is what I see in the movies. Eventually there's going to be some really beautiful music that will start playing and the light is going to shine through the window and it's going to be this perfect moment and I'm going to love you immediately. And that just, you just wait and then they like poop and you're like, okay, I guess that wasn't this moment then. It doesn't happen like that. And I think it's just, I experienced so much grief over, which I realize now was grief that I didn't have that. My maternity leave, when he was born, like it was just not what I expected. And it took me a very long time to feel that in love feeling with him.
Yeah, yes, I remember. Of course, there are some people who do experience that bliss and that halo effect, and they fare really well hormonally after having a baby. I was not one of those people. You were not one of those people, but
it's good to know that those people exist.
Yeah, no, they definitely do. I remember one of my best friends and we had a baby around the same time. She was a little bit after me. And that was when I started realizing that what I was experiencing was a little bit outside of normal, watching her go through her experience. And she was someone who I think that if she was really struggling, she would have felt comfortable telling us. But then watching her go through that really happy postpartum experience, for a while I felt really mad at her, and I like was convinced that she was lying. I was like, this is not what motherhood is. This is not. No, you are painting a false picture, blah blah blah.
Right.
You know, she really did have that experience.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling so inadequate watching that.
Yeah. I had a similar experience with my friend who had a baby shortly after me, and I think I definitely felt a lot of envy for, I wonder what it's like to be so in love with this little baby immediately. Like I wanted that so badly, and I was happy for her that she had it, but I was envious.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's definitely this aspect of what's wrong with me. If you experience anything other than that maternal bliss of having a newborn.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just, we are told that's just something that we're going to feel right away. And I think I expected it. And when I didn't feel it right away, that was traumatic for me, because it felt like a confirmation of all the doubts that I'd had about, am I going to be a good mom? Am I going to be a good parent? Am I going to be able to handle this? Is my kid going to love me? And even from the first second when I didn't feel that, it just felt like a confirmation of all of that. Was like, oh, you can't even do this. Like, you can't even love your kid. And yeah, so that for me was just really difficult. And I think set me on a tough path to come back from for the rest of my postpartum experience.
So what did that journey look like for you?
It was rough. From the second he was born, I just felt really exhausted. My birth experience was a little strange as well, because the rule for when you go to the hospital is like 5-1-1. So you have to have, I think it's 1 minute contractions, 5 minutes apart for an hour. That my contractions started at 3 minutes apart. And so then just never, they just got longer and more intense. But I didn't think that I was even in labor when I went into labor. At 2 a.m. in the morning, I was just like toddling around my house. I hadn't slept. I took a shower. I cleaned the kitchen. I ate some pad thai. And then finally realized after a couple hours of that, I realized like, oh, wait a second. These are all 3 minutes apart and they're getting stronger. I just thought it was Braxton Hicks. And so I finally woke up my husband. Like, I think that this might actually be happening. But anyway, so I was exhausted when I finally had my son, because my contractions had been 3 minutes apart the entire time. I never had a break. I hadn't slept the night before. I was hungry because for hospital births, they don't let you eat.
Right.
And so I was just completely depleted. I did have an epidural, which I'm so glad that I gave myself the grace to do, which at least allowed me to have a nap. So I was very grateful for that. But yeah, I just felt exhausted. Like from the first second, I just felt so exhausted and so depleted and empty. And I think I really expected, once he's born, I'm going to have that moment of, all of a sudden I'm going to be fulfilled, not only as a mother, but as a person. Like, I thought, like, he's going to be my missing piece. This is just going to like completely fulfill my life. And so when he was born and I looked at him and didn't feel that immediate love, I also felt like I was gypped out of the oxytocin. Hormonally, I'm supposed to get at least a little bit of that. I just felt exhausted and empty.
Of course, we had a different experience in the hospital. My birth was quick and it happened during the day. So I was actually pretty rested when he was born, but then we had a horrible experience in postpartum and our time was not restful. We had a bit of a traumatic thing going on with blood sugars and all of that. So by the time we left the hospital, any sort of rested or recovered or energetic that we might have had was completely depleted. And
Right.
like when we left the hospital, we felt like minced meat. So I can relate to that feeling of just starting at a deficit, if you will.
Yeah. And I think from then I just felt like I was always trying to claw my way to feeling okay and pretending that I was feeling okay.
And I think that it can be really difficult to climb your way back up when you're starting from that place.
Yeah. And I think,
not everyone's experience in the hospital is this restful, blissful thing in the postpartum wing.
And I think also, honestly, like I had a hard time finding someone whose experience was that. And I think I understand that's what they're aiming for. But like, even when I was sleeping, I would get woken up every hour to check my temperature. They're taking blood. They're doing all of these things to check on you, which is important. They need to take care of you. But at the same time, it's impossible to rest when you're getting checked on every hour on the hour.
There's so many contradicting messages when it comes to postpartum recovery.
Right.
I feel there's the whole you need to rest and you need to really not go upstairs and you need to stay at home. Then they require you to have a pediatrician appointment 2 days after
get
home from the hospital. And now with COVID, some pediatricians are doing home visits, but that wasn't a thing.
Right.
Yeah. COVID.
Yeah. And let's be honest, everything takes longer. Oh, do you have to pee? You can slot out a half hour because you're going to have to to get everything off, get your peri bottle, get everything nice and clean down there again.
Yep.
Put your pants back on, put those million pads on there, get the witch hazel in there, get the tux. Like it's a whole thing. And yeah, it's just, everything takes so long. Everything takes so long. I think that's one thing I really didn't realize about that like post-birth experience was just how long everything takes. And especially if you breastfeed, that's a whole thing, because then you got to get everything set up. And especially when you're not familiar with the holds and they're so little and still learning how to do it, everything just takes so long. By the time you're done nursing, it's almost time to nurse again.
Oh, I remember when I wasn't breastfeeding, I was Googling things about breast.
Right.
I mean, I was not sleeping when the baby slept. I was looking up how much milk should my baby be getting? How do I know if he's had enough? Is this a good latch? Oh, my milk is a little blue. What does that mean? Might I be pumping? What is a pump? How do I use it?
Yes.
All of these things. And especially with breastfeeding, I feel it's often sold to women as a preventative measure for postpartum mood disorders. It's sold to women as something that if you do it, you will bond with your baby. Yeah. And I will say for me, those were the big motivations for breastfeeding. Was I had a sense that I was probably predisposed to have a PMAD. And I was concerned about bonding because of my own parental relationship things. And so I really wanted to make sure that I bonded with my baby and that I gave myself the best chance of not having a PMAD. So then when I did all the quote unquote right, I had a medication-free birth. I had the oxytocin high. I breastfed. I did all of the quote unquote correct things to avoid postpartum depression. So then when I think for me, there was a little bit of denial.
Yeah.
Because I was like, all of these things prevent postpartum depression.
Right. You're like, but I checked all the boxes.
Make you bond with your babies.
I was honest with my husband. The first couple nights at home, I remember turning to him and just saying, I'm still love you and our dog like a lot more than I love that kid. Is that weird? Is that okay? And he was like, I think that's normal. We just met him. Like, it might take a little time to develop.
People don't give that enough credit that when you have a baby, you have met them for the first time.
Yeah. And they're so needy and they're really not bringing a lot to the table. Like I always tell my friends that now, like, it's okay if you're not immediately a fan of this person that has literally been like leeching off of you for the past 10 months. You had to work very hard to get them out. And now they just need everything from you. If he was a grown man or a grown woman, like it's not like we would immediately be a fan of this person.
I said this to my husband when our son was a newborn. I said, if we had this sort of a relationship with an adult, it would be considered an abusive relationship.
Absolutely, exactly. And so the idea that like we're supposed to just immediately fall in love with them, I'm so happy for the people that it helped that happens to. But let's be honest, that's a biological thing. It's not like you are in love with this really needy human who can't talk or do anything.
Right. There are
Like,
hormones at play.
yes,
Oxytocin is what helps the baby get out. It's also the
right.
love hormone.
Yeah, I think like you said it so perfectly. Like this would be an abusive relationship. It's okay not being completely into it right away. And so that definitely helped me to know that I wasn't alone also. And my husband was saying, he's like, yeah, I agree. He's cool. But I honestly think that my husband had more of that immediate love feeling for him though. Like he was absolutely enamored with him, which also made me feel a lot better because I felt, okay, at least he's getting it from one of us. And anytime I was looking at him, I was trying so hard to smile and fake it because I know how important smiling is for your development. Even if I'm not feeling it, maybe I can just fake it till I make it. But yeah, I felt so empty. I felt really alone. I felt really scared of all of those intrusive thoughts and all these emotions that I had just never felt before. I think for me, the depression felt familiar, but more than anything, the thing that really scared me the longer I went on with my PMADs untreated was the rage.
Yeah. And how did that show up for you?
Oh, that for me was, it came on pretty slowly. For the first couple weeks, it was definitely more rooted in depression and numbness. And slowly, the longer as time went on, the rage just really started to pick up. My son would start crying and I would just start seeing red. My fight or flight response was just always ready to go. I felt like my shoulders would get tense from being so on edge all the time. And it felt like, especially when he would cry, I had to get out of the room. Mm-hmm. And I think about it now and I think, was it because I was worried I would hurt him, or was I thinking about the next steps? And it really felt like there was nothing after that. It was just get out. Yeah. And that for me was rock bottom, was a couple months after he was born. And at this point, I was well aware of the fact that I was experiencing postpartum depression. I knew that the sadness was kicking in. I knew all these things. I knew that I needed help, but I hadn't taken the step to do it yet. And I think I really thought that I could tough it out on my own. And I think another big piece of not wanting to get help was because I was really scared to say all of these things in my head out loud. And even though at that point I knew that it was common and I knew that I wasn't alone, I still was just really scared of admitting it to myself. But yeah, I remember it so clearly. I was putting my son down for a nap and he just would not stop crying. And I put him down in his pack and play and just walked to the other room. I started hyperventilating. I was having a panic attack and I just could not stop thinking. Like everything that was going through my head was, they'll be better off without you. You've got to leave. Go get your keys. You don't even have to take anything. Just get out of the house. Just go there. Don't look back. Like just get out. The urgency with which my body was trying to push me out of the house made it clear to me so much. So that idea of the two brains, the one brain was really trying to push me out and the other brain was thinking like, there's no way in hell you're leaving this kid. Basically, it's right now, you're getting help or you're leaving. Thankfully, I knew where to find help. I immediately got onto my phone, looked on Psychology Today. They have a therapist finder and left a very desperate voicemail for the first person who specialized in postpartum depression. And I've been with that therapist ever since, and it's been really tough work. And I'm just so grateful that I finally showed up for myself and got the help that I really needed.
Yeah. And I also think it's amazing, listening to your story, even though you were experiencing all of these intrusive thoughts, and even though you were having this fight or flight reaction in your body and in your mind and everything, there was still something deep within that was keeping you there, that was keeping you smiling, at your kid that was keeping you staring at your kid, just trying to feel something and kept you in the house that day, right? And
I wanted it. I wanted it. I just didn't know how to get it.
But I think that's the mama bear.
Mm-hmm.
And even when we don't see it, that instinct is there. I think for me, the process took a really long time to even realize what was going on, because they also tell you when you leave the hospital, you're going to feel sad for a little while. It's baby blues, like it's your hormones evening out. And I remember in hindsight, a friend came over and I was having a conversation with him, and I spent the whole time talking about, they say the baby blues last only 2 weeks, but that's a lie. I'm 6 weeks in and I don't have postpartum depression, but I still feel like shit, and that's normal.
Yeah.
Also, this is my own bone to pick, but there's a lot of like mommy blogs and mom Instagram accounts, which sometimes they're a double-edged sword, because there's a lot of them that will talk about the realities of postpartum, and they'll talk about the mesh underwear, they'll talk about the tears, they'll talk about the breastfeeding issues, they'll talk about the cluster feeding and the sleep deprivation, and they're like, normalize postpartum. But it's done almost in a way that romanticizes postpartum mood disorders. And a lot of the stuff that I was reading at the time, normalize feeling like crap, normalize crying a lot, normalize being tired, normalize all of this. When I think what I should have been hearing at the time is, what you're experiencing is a little bit outside of normal and you deserve to get help.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between normalizing something because we need to detach the stigma from it and we need to make people more aware of it, and normalizing something because it's what you should expect to go through and you shouldn't complain about it. And I think the fact is that we need to normalize PMADs and the entire postpartum experience. And what we also need to normalize is people getting treatment for that. And we need to normalize supporting that entire postpartum experience and take that stigma away and take that shame away if you are going through that. I can only imagine how different it would be for people who give birth to have their unmarried, non-child brother-in-law to check in and say, hey, how are you feeling? I know that this period can be really difficult, and I just want you to know that I'm here to support you.
Right.
Like somebody who has no connection to childbirth whatsoever being able to check in on that. And for me, that's what normalizing that postpartum experience means, is making it understood by everybody, not just partners, not just parents, but everybody, that this is what happens. And it's common, but it doesn't mean that they have to be alone. This is just something that they are likely to experience and need support for. And everybody has a role in being that support system for them.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a really big thing too, is the public's assumption of what postpartum is for someone else. I think that the general public does have an assumption that having a new baby is purely a joyful time. For some people, it absolutely is, but it really comes with every emotion under the sun.
Yeah.
And all of it should be accepted.
And the expectation that it's going to be joyful is what's, I think, damaging. Because then for people who it is joyful for, it feels like they're just meeting the need and that's what's expected. And for people who it's not, they feel like they're failing.
Yeah, and I agree with you that joyful feeling comes at different times for different people. For someone, it may happen immediately when the baby's born. And then for other people, it may not be until the baby smiles for the first time or says mama or laughs for the first time. And all of it is okay.
Yeah. And I think also it's just so important to note that just because you have that feeling in the hospital, just because you feel really overjoyed, even if you don't have the baby blues at all, like you can still develop postpartum depression or anxiety or OCD or psychosis or any of these other PMADs that we know about. It doesn't have to be right off the bat.
No, you're correct.
Yeah.
My OCD didn't really kick in until about 6 or 8 weeks. Actually. And for me, it took a while to come to a PTSD and OCD diagnosis. I was originally diagnosed with postpartum anxiety at 7 months. And it was helpful in the sense that I was able to get medication. I was able to start to take the right steps to find a therapist. But it never really felt like that diagnosis was truthful. When I said I have postpartum anxiety or I have postpartum depression, like I always felt like I was lying a little bit and I never quite understood why. And for me, it took a couple of therapists to get to the right place and for someone to finally recognize, oh no, your experience in the hospital was traumatic for you and you have been dealing with the after effects of that and you have been dealing with symptoms of OCD as well as a result. And it took a very long time to come to that conclusion. And you mentioned earlier too that you've dealt with a lot of grief in the wake of having a PMAD. And that is something that I don't hear talked about enough, but I think is something that is really important, especially for people who may be on the other side of a PMAD or who may be further along, like a year postpartum or whatnot. That is something I don't really hear talked about much, but whenever I mention it to someone, they say, oh yeah, you're right. But that grief of really not having that bonding and postpartum lovely experience that you imagined for yourself.
Yeah.
And especially if you had a maternity leave, like I remember just feeling, I just didn't feel like I thought I would as a mom at the end of my maternity leave.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of grief associated with that. And I felt like I missed out on enjoying a lot of my son's first year.
Yep.
Because because I was just trying to feel good.
Yeah. And I think it's tough because the reality is we're never going to get that back. I can't go back to when he was that little and I can't go back to my maternity leave with him. That's just not something that I'm ever going to be able to do. And even though I feel that bond with him now, and even at the time, even then, I still loved this kid to pieces, but now I just feel, I do feel that over the moon bond with him now.
Yeah.
And it almost, once I did develop that bond, it almost made my grief worse in a weird way because it made me feel like, oh, this is what I was missing out on then. And that was hard. And I think it's just, it's tough. And I think that just acknowledging that it is grief, it's not easy, but it allows you to give yourself some grace for it and recognize that, okay, this is something I'm feeling and something I'm going to have to work through and it's okay.
Yeah, for sure. When you were in the middle of it, did you experience any sort of like strong reactions when another friend or relative would talk about how much they loved their kid or how much they enjoyed spending every second with their kid that they could or whatnot?
Yeah, I think I felt, for me, it was very much their experience is the true experience that people have and that people should have and or people are meant to have. And my experience is the one that is broken. Feeling my experience is not common, not normal. Yeah, just that I'm the one who's broken here and that I should be feeling all of those things. And also a lot of envy, feeling like I wish I felt like that. And a lot of rationalizing in my brain. They feel like that because I don't even know if it was that they earned feeling like that or something, but I would just find things about them that I deemed better about them that was a reason why I didn't deserve that. And it was really just so much of those mood and anxiety disorders taking play and taking hold in my brain and rationalizing that for me because my brain works in a pretty rational way. And so it really wanted to find answers for why they could have that and I couldn't. And it took a really negative turn for me, which was not great for my own mental health. But I realize now how damaging that was for myself and just how untrue it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing the lies that your brain will tell you when your chemical balance is off. And I think that we have to give birthing people so much grace because their bodies, from the moment you get pregnant, you have a hormone that is doubling every single day to keep your baby growing, alive, safe. And this number doubles and doubles. It levels out in the second trimester, but your body chemistry is changing over 9 months to grow a whole human, like an entire person. And then your body goes through an entire hormonal process to kick that baby out of your body.
Yep.
And then within 2 days, your estrogen and your progesterone levels are at menopausal levels.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, your hormonal balance has to go back, not back to normal, but it has to recalibrate from having grown a baby for 9 months to that baby is now on the outside and I've got to figure out what the hell I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And there's a whole soup of hormones like estrogen drops, progesterone drops. If you're breastfeeding, prolactin rises, serotonin drops.
It's bonkers. It's just absolutely bonkers.
Right. And so, of course, maybe some women, their bodies are struggling with that. Yeah. And I think like it's not a maternal deficit. It is a chemical process that is really difficult.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is about all this is from Gabby Bernstein. And she said, becoming a mother is a traumatic experience. And it just is so true. No matter, you could have the absolute best pregnancy in the world, best birth in the world, have that feeling of love as soon as your kid comes out, have every single maternal instinct in the world, and have the best support system, all of this. And that experience is always going to be traumatic because it is a completely life-changing experience. Your body goes through so much. There's just no way to come through it completely unscathed.
Yeah.
And our bodies, like you've just said, like they just go through so much.
And then you add on to that too, while your body is recalibrating, you are sleep deprived.
Yeah.
You are, and of course, if you're breastfeeding, every time you put that baby on your boob, the hormones change again.
Yep.
And so you add all of that in, you're getting inadequate rest, usually inadequate food and water, inadequate hygiene. It's no wonder that.
And that's if you're in a vacuum and there's not a lot of expectation from people to come visit, even people with the absolute best intentions of wanting to help. It's still just more pressure. It's just so much.
I don't know about you, but I felt like I couldn't, if someone was over, I couldn't go upstairs and take a nap.
Oh, absolutely.
I felt like I had to be a good host.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Make sure that they're having a good experience with your new baby.
Yeah. Next time around, whenever that is, I think that I will probably only have people in my house who I feel comfortable doing my laundry and letting me take a nap.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like I have to entertain.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is easier with COVID, I suppose.
True.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you went through all of this and you found the help you needed. What did your support team look like during that time?
Honestly, my husband has just been the best support system I ever could have asked for. I think it really did help us that he had seen me in some really low depression states before. And so he knew what I needed. He was very well equipped to just let me sleep when I needed to and rub my back and just not expect me to be anybody. Just let me be numb sometimes, which sounds so depressing, but it's true. And that's just really what I needed. Yeah. And yeah, he just been so wonderful, just completely, non-judgmental and just really, really supportive. I think I know that he would have preferred me to get help a lot earlier. In fact, he did make several mentions of it many times, but
how long was it for you?
When I called the therapist was 5 months in.
Okay.
Yeah. Which 3 months in, I had very much recognized and started learning about what was going on with me, but it still took me another 2 months to actually get professional help, which I was telling people like, oh, if you're going through this, make sure you have help, make sure you get support. And meanwhile, it still took me longer. to get help. But yeah, he was really crucial for my support system. I feel very fortunate that I have two really wonderful friend groups. One friend group which are all moms, and one friend group which none of them have kiddos yet. And that was actually really beneficial to me because it was nice to be able to talk to my friends who had kids about about what I was experiencing and feel validated and be able to share that with them. And at the same time, talk to other people as well who didn't have that background of their own experience and so could offer just different support in that way. Yeah. And it almost felt like it was just a little bit more novel, and I didn't have to, not that I had to do this with my mom friends as well as I think, but it just felt a little bit different in that I didn't have to think, was this something that normal moms would go through? Are they going to think I'm terrible for this? Or should I know this? Like, how are they going to think that I'm a bad mom because I didn't know this before? Or is this something that all moms should know and I don't, and now they're going to judge me? I just assume they probably won't know because they're not moms.
That's true.
Yeah,
There's a plus side to that.
Yeah, and I think it was, so at the end of the day, honestly, I just had a really wonderful group of friends that I felt like I could be honest with.
Great.
And I think that was really really beneficial. And then finally at 5 months, I added my therapist to my support system, and she has just been really amazing and has just been so helpful. I think that one big piece of advice that I would offer to anybody who's struggling with a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder is to make sure that you try and find, if you can, a therapist who specializes in postpartum, because for me, that has just been so crucial.
Yeah.
It's not only knowing all of the different experiences and diagnoses and everything that goes along with that, but also just having her own experience and the experience of all of her other clients. And she was also able to connect me with a support group. That was so beneficial to me, was just having that foundation already laid.
And I bet that was super validating for you too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like that's the number one thing that I felt like I needed during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Just validation that, yes, this is hard.
Yeah.
Validation that, yes, my needs matter and I matter as a person independent of my baby.
Yes. Yep.
And validation that what I was going through wasn't normal. Like literally validation in every sense of the word. And also just doing a good job.
Yeah.
I felt like I constantly needed someone to hold my hand, and I could have used a lot more just, you are doing great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's funny because when you're saying that, it just makes me think also, we don't only just need that in the postpartum period, we need it in pregnancy too. Yeah. And it really made me think about, so when I was pregnant, and actually still now, I suffered from SPD, which is symphysis pubis dysfunction. It's also called pelvic girdle pain. It is a nightmare. And it was so incredibly difficult because I knew I was having a lot of pain early in my pregnancy. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to verbalize it. I didn't know how to explain what that pain was, because especially when you're pregnant, there's all kinds of weird things that hurt. And you're like, I'm feeling pain in an area that I didn't even know existed. Maybe this area didn't exist before. There's also this panic in your head that what if there's something wrong with the baby?
Right. And as a first-time mom, sometimes I think you can just be like, this must just be what pregnancy is like.
Exactly. Exactly. And you go to the doctor and that's what they tell you. Yeah. I went to the doctor several times and said, this is the pain I'm experiencing. And they said to me, it's round ligament pain. And I thankfully eventually realized, like, no, it's not round ligament pain because I also have that. I know what that is. This is different. Finally was able to self-diagnose after long Google research hole that I fell into, figured out that it was SPD, took that information to my doctor, who did not even know what it was, and then had to, after another, I think 2 more doctor's appointments before she finally went back and researched, learned what SPD was, sent me to the physical therapist. And then by that time I was 36 weeks pregnant, and they were basically just, there's nothing we can do. So SPD is when your body produces so much relaxin when you're pregnant because everything has to move, and relaxin is the hormone that allows everything to move. Right. With SPD, your pelvis moves too far apart, and then it basically just wreaks havoc on the rest of your body. And I was in so much pain. It was pretty much pain anytime I would stand on one leg. And especially when I was changing my pants, like excruciating pain in my pelvis. Anytime I rolled over, when I was running, I was so disappointed to have to stop running. And I haven't been running since, actually, because I'm just still struggling with it. I think for me, that was the most difficult part of my pregnancy because, like you mentioned, validation, like I just felt like no one believes me. I'm experiencing this pain that no one believes I'm even having. It seems like I should just be gritting through it. And I just could barely walk. I was in so much pain, and I just felt so disappointed. And then by the time I finally got to the physical therapist's office and they adjusted me, and within 10 minutes, my body had gone back to where it was in this super stretched out position. And they basically told me, well, there's nothing that we can do. But don't worry, it always goes away after labor. Which is not true.
I was about to ask, did yours go away after labor?
No, it did not. And so I think that also contributed to my really disappointing, time in the hospital, because I felt like, okay, as soon as I have this baby, I'm going to start feeling better. I can start running again. I'll feel like myself. And that did not happen. Then I was told, well, it'll go away after breastfeeding. I am now almost 5 months out from breastfeeding and still experiencing it. But I really think that the most frustrating thing for me has just been learning that SPD is estimated to be diagnosed in 1 in 300 women who are, I should say, 1 in 300 people who give birth and are pregnant, 1 in 300. That's what they say for SPD. The estimate is that 25% of birthing people actually have SPD, which means that it's 1 in 4. So we are diagnosing something that 1 in 4 people are experiencing only 1 in 300 times. And that to me is just absolutely unacceptable. And
it sounds very similar to perinatal mood and anxiety disorder.
Yes, exactly.
People struggle. I don't know how many people I have talked to that have said, oh, in hindsight, I definitely had postpartum depression.
Mm-hmm.
That just speaks to the gaps in maternal health care.
Yep.
And I'm not even just talking about like the obstetric model of care, because I had midwifery care and I still had plenty that got missed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is across the board in maternity care that there are many gaps that need to be addressed. There are many women who are falling through the cracks. There's a lot more education that needs to be done with healthcare providers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would really be beneficial to transition to a more holistic model of care and start addressing the whole picture.
Yeah.
Yep. Because I've heard this term thrown around a little bit, matrescence is becoming a new term. Is that transition to becoming a mother, much like adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, it is quite similar in the sense that there is this hormone soup. Your body is changing. You've got weird things coming out of your body, all sorts of stuff. And there's so much we know about adolescence, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much research that's been done on those changes, and there's still so much we don't know.
That's all for now, but join us next time as we continue this discussion. Allison will share her story of how she created her company, Joey For Roo, a baby apparel brand dedicated to supporting and encouraging newly postpartum parents. In this second of 2 episodes, she'll talk about Joey For Roo's mission, her vision for the future of the company, and how she is committed to anti-racism and supporting Black-owned businesses. She'll also share the resources that have been most helpful to her throughout her journeys with postpartum and starting a small business. You can find Joey For Roo on Instagram and Facebook at Joey For Roo, And their website is www.joeyforroo.com. And I've linked all of this in the show notes if you want to take a look. Feel free to follow, like, and share this podcast with anyone that you feel might benefit from it. We're on Instagram and Facebook at Our Village Circle, and our website is www.ourvillagecircle.com. Until next time, bye-bye.